Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We're just going to give it a few moments to allow people time to join. So make yourselves comfortable and we'll be with you very, very shortly. For those of you that are just joining, we're going to get started in about 30 seconds. So do bear with us as we just wait for more people to join. I can see that people are still joining, so we'll just give them a moment. Okay, we're 2 minutes past the hour and conscious of how valuable everyone's time is, I think we should make a start. So good morning, I'm calling in from London, so it's morning for me, but good afternoon to those of you that are dialing in from Asia. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the second of our third webinars, looking at how might we harness this disruption from COVID and really take action right now to drive the realization of a sustainable future. We're going to be looking at how organizations have pivoted in the crisis, but critically and trying to understand what is it that organizations can do right now to really contribute to a sustainable future. And these insights from the webinar will be feeding into our publication, The Future of Sustainability, which will be launched in September of this year. So this conversation is a direct feed into that set of insights. We have got 4 great panelists with us today, and just before I ask them to introduce themselves and their organizations, I'm just mindful that not everybody will know who Forum is, so just a really quick introduction to Forum and me. I'm Sally Uren, I'm the CEO of Forum for the Future. It's my great pleasure to lead this organization that was established to accelerate progress towards sustainable development. We have offices here in London, but also in Singapore, where my co-host Ariel Muller is based, and she'll introduce herself in a little moment. And we also have offices in Mumbai and in the US. And we try and accelerate progress towards sustainable development by focusing on complex challenges and taking a systems-based approach, trying to understand the interconnections in the world around us and really focus on those interconnections to drive catalytic change using our toolkit of systems change tools and techniques and futures tools and techniques. And we work across all sectors because we're really convinced that if we are going to deliver sustainable development, we need to not only see business transform, but foundations, civil society and government. So that is Forum for the Future. What I'd like to do now is turn to the panelists and for them just to say their name, their organisation, just a quick description of what their organisation does. And I'm going to go to Deeksha first, if I may.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you to Forum for Future for inviting me to speak here in this, this forum. I am very excited to be here, excited for these conversations and for the questions from the participants. I work as the Chief of Sustainability for Aditya Birla Group. Aditya Birla Group is a Mumbai-based, Mumbai headquarter conglomerate, which is in a large number of businesses. We have businesses which work in non-ferrous metals, so which is aluminium and copper. We make cement. So these are some heavy manufacturing businesses. We make chloralkali. And on the other side, we are also in the business of financial services, retail, textiles, apparel. So it's a very varied group, and we've been working with Forum on making those transformational changes over the last few years, and we're looking forward to doing much more. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. Mahesh?
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for the opportunity. Very excited to be here. I look after sustainability and social responsibility at Flipkart Group. Flipkart Group is a digital commerce group comprising businesses across e-commerce, digital payments, and supply chain and logistics. Looking forward to an exciting conversation.
Great, thank you. Moving to Christopher.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me on this call. I work with Olam, which is a global food and agribusiness. We work across about 60 countries worldwide, and we source a very wide variety of food products and fiber from a network of around 1 million farmers, many of them smallholders. We started off in Africa, and we are represented across the 3 main continents. My job is to head up the sustainability function in Olam. We are a purpose-driven organization, and our purpose is to reimagine global food and agriculture. And so part of that is really trying to find new ways of working with farmers to turn agriculture from what it is at the moment, which is in many places almost an extractive process, towards regenerative farming, and find ways to support farmers, support their livelihoods, and work in balance with the natural ecosystems that provide us with the services that we need to survive on this planet.
Brilliant, thank you. And Monica?
Thank you, Sally. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Odang, and I'm here today representing Gojek, as well as the foundation that Gojek has established. For those of you who are not familiar with Gojek, we started off as a ride-hailing company in Indonesia, but today we have evolved to become a super app in having presence in Southeast Asia. We have over 20 different apps on our platform, including e-commerce, digital payment, logistics, food delivery, and of course, ride-hailing. We have over 2.5 million partners that are actually on our platform and are dependent on us for our daily income. And I'm also the chairwoman for Yayasan Anak Bangsa Bisa, a foundation that is created by Gojek. So I'm really excited to be here and learning from all the panelists and from also the audience through the Q&A. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. What a wonderful, diverse array of insights we're going to hear today, for sure. So in terms of the format for today, it is very interactive because we want to bring you all into the conversation. So in a moment, we're going to run a poll and just get a sense of who all is in this conversation today. And once we've done that, I would encourage you to use the chat just to introduce yourselves and your organization and where you're based, just so we get a sense of who we're talking to. We will also be encouraging to use a Q&A to post any questions for the panelists. The format is we'll run through the first question, then Ariel is going to share the insights from the current research that we are accessing through Future of Sustainability. We'll then pose our second question to the panelists, and then we'll come to you, the audience. So to get us started, if you wouldn't mind just submitting where you're from today, so we can get a sense of who is in our audience for this really exciting conversation. So please take a moment to participate in the poll. And then once you've done that, if you don't feel too shy, declare yourself on chat. That would be really marvelous to see who's involved in the conversation. How are we doing on the poll, Valentina? Great. Oh, I should have introduced Valentina. Valentina is the whiz behind the technology today. So Valentina is a very important part of this conversation as well. Brilliant. So we have got a really interesting split. So 40% business, but then 30% from the non-profit sector, which is super to see. And then a really nice mix of government, civil society. Looks like it might be 2 students, 1% of the number we have here, but you're very welcome. Academia, philanthropy. That's great. That is absolutely what we wanted to see, which was a diverse audience, because the more we can talk across different sectors, the more chance we have of driving the change that we want to see. So just before I pose the first question, we did ask a number of you to fill in a pre-survey questionnaire, and I wondered, Valentina, whether we could just get a sense of what that told us. We asked a few questions, and what I would like to draw your attention to is a couple of things here. So we asked, to what extent do you feel the pandemic has influenced your personal values? And 81%, so it put them into greater focus. Now, we ran this poll ahead of the first webinar, which had a majority of a European audience, and we got 80% for the same answer. So definitely we're seeing that this pandemic has really brought to the fore our personal values, which is really important when we're wanting to drive sustainable outcomes. And then I think what's really interesting, the second feature here, is that 38% said the pandemic had increased their organisation's ambition to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, which is pretty much what we had in the first webinar. I think it was 39%. And then for a number, it hasn't made any difference. So on balance, maybe we're in a net positive position. So this really accords to what we're seeing through the conversations that Forum is having with our partners. We're definitely seeing that amongst the audience that we work with, an increase in ambition to deliver sustainable development at this time, recognizing that, yes, it's a really disruptive and discontinuous time, but with that disruption becomes an opportunity to really think big and ambitiously. So it's really great to see that trend playing through in this pre-survey questionnaire. So without further ado, let's move to our first question, which is, what are the 2 to 3 things that you and your organization have done differently in this pandemic that's in line with a sustainability ambition? So what have been those immediate pivots that you've made to drive sustainability? And I'm going to go to Deeksha first, if I may.
Yeah, Sally, actually, so when we spoke earlier, and then when I was putting my thoughts together on what is it that we've been doing differently, I thought one thing which I would like to share here, which has kind of impacted overall in the way we are now working. So as I mentioned earlier, that Aditya Birla Group is heavily into manufacturing on one side, and then services business. And one thing which has stood out is that in a way, fortunately, that a lot of our manufacturing units have continued to operate during the pandemic. Initial few weeks were a bit tough when we were trying to figure how to kind of, how to even do testing, or to kind of do that tracing, and what do we do with if we were to find people who were not well. So initial couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I would say, and also parallelly to figure that people who are working from home, how do we all stay engaged? And I think, like many of us, whether it's been Zoom, so for us as a group, as Aditya Birla Group, Teams has served us very well. It's been one of those discoveries. And I think what I'd like to talk about is that how we found a new normal in terms of working virtually, and how that in a way created, I don't know, in that in an official setup, or how do you say that, but that intimacy which has come out of working like this, that I'm sitting in my house, but I'm working all day, and we're engaging with all kinds of stakeholders through this virtual medium, whether it's been the colleagues who are sitting in factory locations, whether it's the colleagues who are working from their homes, whether it's the government officials, because a lot of A part of sustainability work is around working on environment, working on safety, working on health aspects. So how we've engaged with colleagues or different stakeholders like that, and that has really accelerated some of the work because of the intimacy. For example, to have conversations with the large cluster of units that we have in a remote location in India. Otherwise, I would have had to travel. I would say, okay, I would go after 3 months. Who would be available, not available, versus now, I don't have to worry that I have to travel. We are all able to fit in each other into our calendars. Mm-hmm. Therefore, difficult conversations about making changes have become easier. And in driving the sustainability agenda, that is fundamental to it, to be able to have difficult conversations quickly and with that comfort. So I would say that's one very big change. I'm able to very comfortably tell this gentleman who's a very senior fellow to say, this is exactly the point that you're not able to do, and this is a change we need, let's do it. So that's one thing that has come about and will stay. So that would be one thing that I would talk about, that how with the higher comfort level, more quickly we are able to have more difficult conversations about the transformations that we need to make.
Mm-hmm.
On so I think that's one thing that I would
thank you, Diksha, and that was very powerfully articulated. And whilst sometimes it is harder to work online, it is actually a great way of engaging colleagues that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily speak to so regularly. And certainly we found that at Forum with our 4 offices. Zoom has been a great kind of democratizer. Brilliant. So if we might then move to Mahesh, what have you done differently in this pandemic? Oh, you're on mute, Mahesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali. I relate to a lot of what Diksha shared in terms of pivoting online and sort of getting teams to work together. That was our immediate response was. But further, I think a couple of things which stood out for me in this last 3 months has been just the sheer agility in our actions. When we look at how we've been able to collaborate with various partners, including even policymakers, because this was an uncharted territory in terms of how do you support consumers at large, what is essential, what is non-essential, how do you get supply chains sanitized and secured, how do you get employee health, safety in the forefront. A lot of that collaboration and just the sheer speed in our action was quite heartwarming, and it was quite counterintuitive. Earlier, if you would have thought of it saying, look, you have to work remotely for 3 months, all this would happen. A couple of examples, like even on the sustainability agenda, we hit our 50% plastic reduction milestone in May this year. And this was middle of everything practically being shut down. We ended up leveraging our global supply chain and sourcing to bring in a lot of PPE supplies to empower frontline healthcare workers. And this was global supply chain, imports, stuff arriving from overseas and so on. It still worked. So I'd say the progress, despite months of lockdown dependency, the speed of it was quite exemplary and quite heartwarming. The second bit was how we were able to involve our employees as a change agent in this journey. As the saying goes, it takes a village to embed sustainability business practices. And in the entire organization, we were quite fortunate that we had series of events through the month of May and June, leading up to a sustainability event, an internal sustainability champions group and all that. So in a way, in these last 3 months, sustainability has come a lot more to foreground than it was earlier, given how employees have really taken up to this, how we've been able to tap into ideas and support the head for this cause. So I'd say those 2 are clear standout for me in terms of how the agility in our actions and how involving our employees as a change agent has really shaped the last 3 months for us.
Great, thank you. And I like the commonality of the acceleration. So Deeksha talked about acceleration towards progress, and you talked there about the acceleration of just getting things done. So Christopher, what have you done differently?
Thank you, Sally. So in many ways, Olam was sort of pre-prepared for a crisis of this sort because we are a food and ingredients business. So, biosecurity and hygiene in our factories has always been a very, very high priority. And so within our own operations, we're very familiar with that sort of routine of wearing masks and nets and so forth to protect each other. And we've also been faced in our history by public health crises such as Ebola in some of the countries that we've been working with. So we had some systems, and it was part of our internal DNA to be able to deal with this. But this is on a completely uncomparable scale to what happened previously. And so the early days of the crisis were really about very rapidly pivoting to having a global response and very clear messaging internally about protecting our own staff, having the right sort of hygiene reactions, and also about protecting the community we work in. The initial insistence, we work very closely with our comms department to get the message out about the proper behaviors in our own factories and with the communities around social distancing, about hand washing and hygiene. But also what I saw, and it was very inspiring, was that the individual countries mobilized extremely quickly to understand what the crises were and start providing the sort of assistance required to maintain the critical farmer services, because ultimately our business depends on farmers being able to harvest and sell their crops to us, and so we mobilized very quickly. We've distributed something like $5.7 million worth of aid in various forms around the world, but also mobilized our digital systems to enable safe purchase and continuity of the supply chains. So for instance, using our digital supplier engagement apps, distributing those to cooperative leaders and buying agents so that they can actually get to the farmers and reach very large numbers of farmers in order to maintain those supply chains. And that's really the key here, is that as a critical service and business, the food business, we have to maintain continuity, and that means supporting the farmers and the businesses that we work with. And obviously, the big change here has been a massive emphasis on the digital services and on remote working, as I think everybody in this call will have experienced. But scaling that up now to something which was far beyond what we knew before.
Great, thank you very much, Christopher. Just to our good, we've got a question in the Q&A box. I just wanted to encourage people to use the Q&A box. We will be monitoring it. But Monica, love to hear what you've done differently.
Sure, thank you. I think acceleration is definitely the theme that a lot of organization has adopted during this time. For us at Gojek, obviously during the early days of the pandemic, we saw the dramatic impact to our business. But beyond that, what we saw was also the dramatic impact what the pandemic has done to our partners. Like I said earlier, we have over 2.5 million partners who are dependent on us. And if we were to focus especially on the Indonesian economy, the informal sector actually is the backbone of the Indonesian economy. Well, we saw that the government and private sector had introduced a lot of initiatives to actually support the informal sector. But, given the fact that we have quite a huge number of people who are dependent on us, and we saw that their income dropped by over 80% in the early days of the pandemic, the potential for them to drop below poverty line was actually extremely high. So we accelerated our plan to develop the foundation. So the foundation was actually created within a week. It was created within a week, and the initial funding, we managed to gather over $6.6 million. It was the donation basically comprised of all the executives taking salary cuts and all the employees donating their merit increase and promotion increase throughout the year. So we managed to get that $6.6 million initially to help and support a lot of our partners. So I think during this time, in the past 3 to 4 months, our focus has been definitely geared towards two different things. One is all around immediate relief in supporting their livelihoods, ensuring that our partners, actually, have food on the table. And with that, we've done like staple goods program. We've done also providing meals programs, and the free meals program is not only for our partners, but it's also for the healthcare workers, obviously, who are in the front lines and fighting and risking their life every day. So, that's one. And obviously, for our merchants, we saw that, a lot of consumers were concerned over food hygiene and food safety. So as a business, we actually moved quite swiftly in terms of providing materials, trainings, and equipments also to ensure that our merchants actually know what is the standard protocol or the new normal that they would need to implement into their businesses moving forward once the pandemic is over. So I think it's a lot of the initiative is supporting towards their livelihoods. We also want to equip all of our partners with basically equipments to ensure that they can continue their job. We've distributed over 5 million masks to the frontliners as well as to our driver partners. So that's all around supporting the livelihoods. And second, I think the focus is all around recovery effort and how we can actually ensure economic growth in the future once the economy actually opens up. And throughout the pandemic, I think one of the things that we have done is that through our programs, we wanted to ensure that all of our partners, make it the merchant, make it our drivers, do not fall under the poverty line, that they would not even have enough capital or anything for them to actually then start again, right? Because once you lose your asset, once you're unable to open your business, then you're not even able to start at that point zero, right? So through our programs, what we have done is actually, we created basically a circular economy within our ecosystem. So we wanted to ensure that our programs actually had a multiplier effect. So for example, when we were providing free meals to our drivers, or as well as to the healthcare workers, we were actually ordering meals from our MSMEs, this micro SMEs that are deeply impacted. So they actually have, sort of this artificial income to help them sustain. And obviously now with the economy opening up, they have managed to weather the storm and able to continue business, even though not to the normal pace, but at least they're back in business. Mm-hmm. So our focus has been in those two areas.
Great, thank you. I'm struck by all of your answers that in many ways all of you are pointing to an acceleration during this pandemic of a trend that we were seeing ahead of the pandemic, which was the kind of real utilization of digital as an enabler. And I've just been really interested that you've all described an acceleration of digital as an enabler of engagement, access to finance for smallholders, access to basic needs, and then access to innovation. So really articulating this circular economy. But I think my other kind of insight listening to you all would be that I'm struck by that as organizations, what you have done is what others haven't done, which is you've not retreated to look after your own self-interest. You've actually really stepped into a space where you've assumed much wider responsibility for your broader stakeholders, which is just really encouraging to hear, and is a key characteristic of what we think needs to happen as we come out of this pandemic. Before I just hand to Ariel, who's going to share with you the insights that we're gathering through our future sustainability exploration, and she's going to talk a bit about what we're calling this transform trajectory, which is definitely, in terms of how you all have responded, is where I see that pathway in terms of your response emerging. I just wanted to ask another question of our audience. So Valentina, if you wouldn't mind posing the second poll. And it's very much linked with what we've been hearing, which is very strong sense of purpose-driven organizations. And the question to you all online is, since the outbreak of this pandemic, to what extent has your organization had to pivot its purpose? Full pivot, some aspects, very few. And what we discovered when we ran this poll in Europe is that actually sustainability is already at the core of our purpose, was relevant to quite a few of the organizations online. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and just to give us a sense of how COVID has impacted your purpose as an organization, because it really is a relevant question given that we've heard how strong and purpose-driven our panelists are in their approach to their response. So if we can just take a moment. And it's fine if you don't know. Feel free to use that category. How are we doing, Valentina? So a few have done a full pivot, and wow, we've got some very purpose-driven organizations on our call. Half of you have sustainability already at the heart of your purpose, which is great to see. But then I think it's interesting to see a very small doing a full pivot, but some aspects of the purpose have pivoted. Great, and very small to say not at all. So that kind of confirms the narrative that we're hearing today, which is that this pandemic has offered an opportunity to really focus in on this notion of purpose, which we think is going to be very important as we emerge from this crisis. I'm going to hand to Ariel now, who is our Director of Forum for the Future in Asia. So she oversees operations in the Singapore office and in Mumbai. And Ariel's going to share with you the emerging insights from future sustainability as a backdrop to the second question to the panelists, which I will pose in a moment. Ariel.
Thank you very much, Sally, and thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to have you here, and especially to our panelists. Really appreciate your contributions today. I think one of the big questions underlying our use of these trajectories is this a crisis, or is this an opportunity? And do we have the opportunity to reinvent coming out of this in a new and different way? And I think, and how do the decisions we make today actually inform what trajectory we head on in terms of over the long term. And of course, those decisions are made by the conversations we have, and what we need in order to have quality conversations are some tools to facilitate a way of talking and thinking about the future. So at Forum, we use futures a lot as a way to create a type of shared vision across with multi-stakeholders and decide how might we take collective action. And in the context of these emerging trajectories, which you're looking at now, what we thought about in terms of COVID was that there's a number of potential pathways that we might take coming out of COVID. And if we can begin to understand what underpins those pathways and talk about those potential pathways, then we can make better decisions for the long term. So what I'd like to do is walk you through those and speak to you a little bit about those. You'll see that, so we've got the three pathways of transform, disciplined, and collapse. There is actually a fourth unknown trajectory, which is essentially ongoing uncertainty and collapse, but we hope that we'll mainly be headed on these three trajectories. So the transform trajectory, the underlying mindset for that is a regenerative mindset. And that's one in which there's a clear realization that human health and planetary health are interdependent. Signals of change that we're seeing include conditional bailouts that force companies to improve their environmental and social performance. I would also say the accelerated action from many of the companies that our panelists represent today. Calls for Green New Deals, and at a community level, I think many of the stories of community support that we felt during the pandemic, when we felt an interdependence with one another, represents that type of regenerative mindset, and it's that mindset that would put us on the transformed trajectory. The collapse trajectory is associated with a self-interested mindset, and that's in which resources are perceived as very scarce and must be hoarded. And it signifies a breakdown of collaboration and the rise of nationalism. And on the individual level, an example of this might actually be the panic buying of toilet paper. So we actually express these three trajectories even personally, not just as an organizational level. On a national level, the US, of course, buying up the COVID-19 pharmaceutical supplies would be another example of headed on that trajectory of collapse. The discipline trajectory is associated with the control mindset, and this is where technological measures to protect public health have trade-offs with individual freedoms and privacy. And examples of this would be the emergence of the track and trace programs. I think that's the one that most immediately comes to mind. So of course, in reality, these are all very dynamic, and we're actually seeing the signals of all of these occurring simultaneously. And we might even, as either as observers we see them, or even individually we experience them in terms of actually those different dynamics. What we began to recognize that actually there are crossovers when you recognize that there is a type of overlap between them, that it points to potential scenarios of what the future might hold, which would inform us then how might we respond and make different decisions to enable the future that we want. So one future being the shallow transition. So where there's genuine effort, but we don't actually create that mindset shift and value shift that really puts us on the trajectory of transform, where purpose is really embodied into the core of the business. The new great game, which is big blocks vying for power and resources amid a declining and unstable landscape. And then the final potential scenario would be eco-fascism and the rising of green nationalism. Most of our conversations are pointing to that shallow transition, that we have good intentions in order to do what we want to do, but we aren't quite enabling that full mindset shift in policy, shift in capital that will move us to that transformed trajectory. So this is what we've been using to facilitate conversations around what's the future we want to make, and also as a way to understand what signals are we seeing. And with that, I'll pass it back to Sally.
Thank you very much, Ariel. So my second question to all of the panelists is, what are the 1, 2, 3 things that your organization is doing that will contribute to the emergence of that transformed trajectory? And if I can just go in the same order as before and just ask you all to just take a couple of minutes to answer this, because I'm really keen that we invite a couple of questions from our audience here today. So Deeksha, how is Aditya Birla Group contributing to the emergence of that transformed trajectory?
Thanks, Ariel, and thanks, Sally. And while I'd read it, but when I saw that that diagram put up there, it kind of tends to make you think again. I think it comes back to how we are defining what sustainability or the transformation means for the business. So if we're saying that being sustainable means having that resilience, will we be around? So it links back to doing things which will, to stay, so to be around now and future. We would need that it needs to be changed. This pandemic has made it very clear. Right from what I spoke earlier to also, in a way, it's allowed us to zoom in and see that, if we were to do what we've been talking about, this is how it would look. It's given us a kind of a sneak peek into the future. That, this is how it would become greener, this is how air quality would improve. And it's made this answer very clear. This is something which I've been using in many of our conversations. It's made it very clear whose sustainability are we talking about. So, otherwise many times one challenge which is there about sustainability is that people tend to think, oh, it's about, are we saving the earth? Who are we saving? we are saving ourselves. So we're saving ourselves as human beings, as businesses. And when that becomes clear, these conversations have become easier. Then linking it to saying that when we talk about, for example, value chain, or for example, value chain on both sides, whether it's the upstream, when we talk about saying we've been able to run those factories because we've been engaged with the suppliers, working with them to say what would, for us to be resilient, they need to be resilient. So am I getting my supplies? And for example, when Monica talked about and there's a question I can see which is there in the Q&A as well, down in the value chain with our customers. Now, when we talk about, say, MSMEs, now for our aluminium business, for them to survive, we may make aluminium, but the products of aluminium are largely made by the players in MSMEs. So working with them, I will survive and thrive when everybody else in value chain survives and thrives. So that recognition has become clearer because things have played out in a short time frame and in an accelerated, zoomed in way. So I think that's really helped, and I think that's what would stay, that it is all about those partnerships, working in the value chain and on what are those aspects, and that it is for our resilience, our sustainability. So I think that's one thing which this pandemic has made it easier, that we need to have that courage to collaborate with everyone. Otherwise, one would keep postponing these things.
Yeah.
They fundamentally sounded right, but having that, that we need to do it quickly and to have courage to do it without worrying about saying, across hierarchies, one is worrying less, across the value chains, one is worrying less. So I think that has come out, and that would stay, is what I would talk about. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Deeksha. Mahesh, how are you going to contribute to transform?
Thanks, Sally, and great points made by Deeksha. I think there are three points I wanted to talk about as we look forward in the near future and beyond. First really is about setting the tone with audacious sustainability goals and risk-taking. I come from an industry which is relatively nascent. We have benefit of not having too much legacy. So it's very important to not be overly cautious for waiting for perfect solutions to evolve. It's important to be taking continuous calculated risk and really evolving solution to bring agility and strong bias for action with a sense of urgency. So I think setting the tone for ourselves and also then leading the industry along that path is going to be very important. That's something we've done so far, and we are looking forward to pick pace on that. The second bit, and I know Ariel alluded to it, we strongly believe that transform trajectory or transformation or sustainable development is all about mindset and harnessing the power of interconnectedness between a lot of stakeholders across the value chain. Deeksha alluded to it to some extent as well. At Flipkart Group, what we really want to do is sort of leverage on those core expertise. We work with a number of customers, suppliers, sellers, brand partners, and so on. And each of them have a very unique viewpoint on a problem statement, including even the policymakers. How do you get every ecosystem player aligned to a vision and then collectively sort of work, building that perspective? It's just gonna help us solve problems faster and more sustainable if we take that ecosystem approach versus trying to solve everything on our own. And it's clearly visible in how we have solved, let's say, sustainable mobility in terms of electric vehicles, or in terms of how we've solved for our packaging ambitions. So ecosystem approach would be the second point. The third point is really about how do we leverage technology to make solutions and speed more permanent. And I think we've seen in recent crisis how technology has been a great savior. But when you really look at technology today in the Indian context, where distribution could be challenging, your ability to engage with a set of stakeholders, even just take a view of supply chain. If you could digitize entire supply chain, you could digitize entire logistics fulfillment. We're doing a lot of work leveraging technology to bring in sort of underserved section of commerce and trade, like artisans, weavers, MSMEs, farmers, to mainstream platform by giving them market access. We launched a program last year, which today impacts over 600,000 artisans positively. But those are just tip of iceberg given Indian market context. There's a long way to go. And we think leveraging technology and reach, there could be a big difference which could be made in the sustainable transformation journey.
Great, thank you very much. Turning to the agricultural supply chain, Christopher, how is Olam going to contribute to transform?
Thanks, Sally. So I think, after this sort of initial sort of scramble to react to the multiple challenges of the COVID crisis, being, locked down in many, many countries, what we're doing now is really trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of what are the challenges in the supply chains. And I've got to lean here on some recent internal surveys, or surveys that our social team has done, led out of a team based in Abidjan by Judy Green, who's been working to directly survey farmers using all of these digital tools, really to understand what are the challenges to the livelihoods and to the food security and so forth of our farmers. We've run now these surveys with nearly 2,500 farmers across 10 countries, plus our managers in another 25 countries, really asking the key questions about what is it that is impacting your life. And we're finding really some rather alarming answers in that, over half of the farmers that we work with in those 10 sort of priority countries were saying that they had access to less food than they normally would, that they had access to less income, that they are worried about access to inputs, that food is costing more, and so forth. And we're understanding what specifically is happening in each country and in each province, down to the village level, is really critical in shaping the reaction that we have to have. And so there's a continuing, ongoing crisis reaction that we have to take part in to ensure health and food security, in order to protect the children, particularly children who've not been able to access school. That's going to impact long term their ability to earn a livelihood around and aspects around their literacy and numeracy and so forth. And we have to continue to use the tools that we've got to strengthen rural livelihoods. And that's using all of the tools that Olam has been developing for the last several decades now, but particularly in the last 10 years around supporting farmers' access to finance, to inputs, and working with them to train them on better agricultural practices so they can produce more and better product, and to diversify their incomes. So all of those things, excuse me, all of those things are high priorities, really protecting the farmers. I think beyond that, what we need to be doing is looking to what are the transformative solutions that we can propose and that we can work in partnership with others to change the food supply chains from where they are. Many of our farmers are working at the edge of poverty, if not in a situation of poverty. And that's really about understanding, as I said, the detail of their lives. And so we've been deploying a number of digital tools and mapping tools and data collection to understand the challenges that people face, but also to communicate that with our customers. Because I think there's been a general realization, that sustainable food supply chains are critical to all of us, and that consumers are very hungry for it. But in fact, little is known. I mean, in commodity supply chains, little is known. The traceability of commodities is very poor overall. So we've been working very hard, and we will continue to try and deliver those insights to our customers through our traceability and digital platforms like AtSource, which is a digital platform that we've developed to deliver real insights into the metrics that characterize our supply chains and bring our customers in, you know, the big food manufacturers and retailers, bring them into the conversation, allow them to make choices about the sorts of things that they want to prioritize and support. And I very strongly believe, you know, that the traceability of the crops will enable our customers to make better choices and work with us. So we just last week released the locations of all 190 cooperatives that we work with in Côte d'Ivoire, so that we can actually work with our customers on reducing the challenges of child labor and deforestation in the cocoa sector. And we've also made a pledge that we would bring 150,000 cocoa farmers up to a living income, which, you know, cocoa is a very big challenge. So all of these solutions around traceability, about understanding the supply chain, really come to working with the people who are producing crops within defined boundaries, in where they work and where ecosystems are delivered, and where governance is actually applied. And that, I think, is around the real transformation, is around scaling up our efforts and working across, not just within our sector, but also across sectors, to plan better and to share what a vision for a sustainable future means within defined boundaries. And I think that that's the big challenge for us now, is to develop real place-based vision for what sustainability means, so that we can balance human needs with to protect the ecosystems and the ecosystem services that keep us all alive.
Thank you, Christopher. Great. Monica, how are you going to contribute to transform?
I think, you know, for us, you know, Gojek is very fortunate that our company is actually founded on three pillars, which is speed, innovation, and social impact. And, you know, with social impact being embedded into our DNA from the start, it has sort of been our guiding lights and how we run our business. I think even, you know, if we look at how we have our approach in terms of managing our partners, we actually deeply embed them into our ecosystem, and we actually look after them more beyond just you know, providing them with income. But you know, for example, one of the programs that we've created internally is called Swadaya, means self-sustained. We want to actually empower them to be able to actually you know, have access to financial inclusion, have access to all of these other technologies that previously they actually did not have access to. And so I think, you know, with that spirit, that was also part of the reason why we wanted to create the foundation, because because currently, obviously, if within Gojek as a company, our reach is limited only within our ecosystem. But going back, you know, in the majority of the backbone of Indonesian economy is actually supported by the informal sector. So how can we actually help and support more of these people using the same principle that Gojek actually already have, right? Enabling them and providing them digital literacy, providing them also with financial inclusion. And so, you know, with that, that's actually going to be the main focus for the foundation in the coming years. And that all actually stems from change of mindset, right? How we actually look at our partners. I know a lot of, if we look at, you know, some other companies that are in the similar industry or similar business as us, the way they look at their partners is not similar with how we actually involve them into our ecosystem. And, you know, with that, we believe that by empowering and allowing more people, obviously, this can actually bring a greater impact and a multiplier impact, definitely not only for us as a company, for our you know, business sustainability, but it's good for Indonesia as a country, right? So again, I think our focus, especially in the foundation, you know, leveraging a lot from you know, Gojek as our parent company, from their experiences, we actually want to create sustainable opportunities and really enabling those in the informal sector to actually support one another and actually survive and thrive, right? Because yeah,
Okay.
Have like a few stats that I have in mind. Like for example, in Indonesia, only 35% of our population actually have bank accounts. The rest actually do not have bank accounts, right? So, you know, they're practically invisible in the economy, right? And how do we actually then start to bring them up so that we can actually create the awareness of this population? So I think our next dream, or what we aim to do, is actually to how we can actually shed some light on this group of people. And these group of people obviously are the ones who are most vulnerable. They're the underserved in the communities, and most vulnerable, especially towards any situation. And during a pandemic like this, they're definitely the ones that are hit the most.
Wow, marvelous. I mean, such rich insight there, and so many ways that you can see that transform trajectory emerge. And the richness of the insights have meant that we're running out of time, unfortunately. But so I'm going to have to rapidly rethink the next 4 minutes. But as I do that, I just wanted to pull out some of the themes I heard from very practical ways in which you as organizations are contributing to transform. And what really struck me was the importance of recognizing that the interdependency. Diksha, you talked about the interdependency of you as an organization, your supply chain, as being a kind of feature of transform, as is having a vision. Mahesh, Christopher, you both talked about having a vision, which then enables you to, in the case of Mahesh, take a few risks. What you all talked about there was harnessing the power of the interconnectedness across your supply chains, across the broader community, across sectors. And that's definitely a feature of transform, as is leveraging technology, and as is enabling those around you to really get access to finance, get access to education. And that becomes a story of abundance and a story of, flourishment, which I think is really brilliant. Ariel, I'm going to give you the Herculean task of choosing one question, which you'll have to decide who it goes to. But what I will say for those of you online, we will take the questions off the Q&A, and we will, when we come back to you, just sharing the link to this webinar recording, we'll do our best to give you the answers. So please don't feel shortchanged if you've put a question in the Q&A and you haven't had an answer. We will come back to you with our response. But Ariel, if you were to pick one question, what would it be?
So it's fairly straightforward because it's been voted up quite a bit. In interest of speed, I'm going to gamify it, which means that the first piece of it is a yes or no question to the panelist, and the first person that says yes, you will answer the question. I will read the question to you. Are you ready? Okay. Have any of the panelist companies changed how they've engaged with government as part of their COVID response, i.e. lobbying or advocacy for a better social contract, for example?
Yes.
There you go, we have a winner.
Monica, please take 30 seconds to answer the question.
We want to hear the story.
You're on mute.
Yeah, we have to hear the stories that goes with it.
So Monica, how have you influenced government in 30 seconds?
No, I think we see that government is definitely, especially in throughout the pandemic situation, government is definitely our strongest ally, right? And big change can only happen if we actually have their support. And I think our responsibility from the private sector is to provide real situation on the ground and to be able to help and shape the government informing policies, new policies that will actually impact the lives of many people. So I think in 30 seconds, that would be my fastest answer.
Brilliant. Well done. So I am going to draw us to a close because I am very mindful that people will have other things to do at the top of the hour in our Zoom world or Teams world, whatever is your virtual platform of choice. What I would like to say is this conversation is feeding into the future of sustainability. If you'd like to find out more about future sustainability, then get it. Actually, let's not share the screen, Valentina. It's fine. I'll just sum up. So if you want to find out more about future sustainability, just let us know. We are keen to bring on board more partners. I would really like to say a huge thanks to our panelists for taking the time to share how you've pivoted in response to this pandemic, but critically what you're doing to ensure the emergence of the transformed trajectory. Because the reality is that what we do right now, particularly over the next 6 to 12 months, has never mattered more. And the more attention we pay to that transformed trajectory, the more likely it is to emerge, because self-fulfilling and self-defeating prophecies are real. So the more attention we pay to really driving that transformation, the better. And you all have said this in different ways, but I would just underscore the importance of mindset. So if we emerge from this crisis thinking, yes, we can build a sustainable and a resilient future, then we just might. So we will be in touch after this webinar. Thank you all very much. We will download the questions. We'll come back to you with some answers. It was a really rich and fascinating discussion and has set me up well for the day ahead. So thank you all very much for your time. It's been a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sally. Thank you, everybody.